Hey everyone, my name is Savannah Harrell and I'm so excited to be a part of the Young Adults team, and I'm especially excited to be coming on during such an exciting series, Monuments and Moments. If you haven't had a chance to go and check out Luke's message, I suggest you do it. You won't regret it. There's so much goodness for us to learn there. And last week in your small groups, you talked about experiences in your life that can lead to monuments and how everyone might have a different things that they experience in their life that lead to monument, pillar of faith moments in your life that you can look back on and that will forever remind you of the Lord's provision and faithfulness in your life. But this week, we're going to talk about what we do when there are moments that we're experiencing that really make it hard for us to remember those monuments, because that's how life goes, right? There are things that we're going to experience that are difficult. We're going to encounter hard seasons. We're going to be told no. We're going to be told not yet. We're going to have seasons of waiting in our lives. And that's what we're going to look at this week. So when we're looking at waiting, what comes to mind for you in that? Lots of times it's probably not something good, or we don't have good feelings about waiting. Waiting's never been something that people are typically good at. And there are different kinds of waiting that we can experience too. We can wait idly. We can just let time tick by and nothing really changes. We can wait impatiently. We can get upset that things aren't happening on the timeline that we want them to. We can kind of, get annoyed that things aren't happening the way that we hope they would. We can also get angry while we wait. But I want us to look at today what it looks like to turn our waiting season into moments of worship. Because I think for a lot of us, during those seasons of waiting, I think something that's very common for us to do is we kind of look at God and we feel like he's maybe forgotten us, or he doesn't see us, or he doesn't care about us. I think those are very common things that can pop up in our minds when we are experiencing seasons of waiting. But I think that what we can find is that seasons of waiting are actually some of the most beautiful moments that we can experience in our relationship with the Lord. And in those moments where we're waiting, we can learn so much about his character, about how much he does love us, and that he hasn't forgotten us at all. In fact, he loves us so much that he's choosing to put us in this season of waiting so that we can grow in our relationship with him even more. So let's look at Abraham in Genesis 16 and kind of look at what not to do in a season of waiting. So he was told that he was going to be the father of many nations, him and Sarah, his wife. But time passed by, a good amount of time passed by, and there had been no progress made towards this promise that God had given him. And so what did they do? They took matters into their own hands. And we all know how that story ends. It gets a little chaotic, and God ends up making a way regardless of their actions in that moment. But what I want us to focus on is this tendency to want to take matters into our own hands, and how we can, instead of struggling in our moments of waiting, how can we really worship the Lord and succeed in those moments instead of struggle? Because I think it's a very normal tendency for us to want to take over, because again, we start to question the Lord's goodness and maybe he's forgotten us. But I really want us to look at how we can shift that, and we can choose to trust him and trust his plan instead of control the situation. I know that this can be so much easier said than done. When you're in the thick of it, it seems really hard to surrender that control over to the Lord and really lean into what he's trying to teach you during a waiting period, and to remember those monument moments and to know that the Lord hasn't forgotten me. And I wouldn't say anything to you that I haven't seen lived out in my own life. And a couple of moments come to mind mainly when my husband had just graduated school, or he was getting ready to graduate, and we'd been married for about a year, and we weren't sure where we were going to go. We were in Starkville, Mississippi at Mississippi State University, and we were just waiting for those next steps. Maybe some of you can relate to that. Maybe that's where you are, or you know that that's going to be in your future soon. And we felt very confident, for whatever reason, that we were going to end up in Birmingham, that he was going to have a job in Birmingham, and we just kind of were zeroed in to where that's where we were going to be. And he had taken many interviews, many conversations with people that whole last senior year. And so we felt confident in saying we were going to end up in Birmingham. Well, then it was time for those conversations to turn into job offers and true interviews that led to a job. And we found that the phone was really quiet. We weren't getting emails. There wasn't much communication at all. And we were really starting to wonder what our lives were going to look like. We knew when we needed to be out of our apartment. We knew that, this next chapter of our lives was getting ready to be started, but it was such an interesting time of our lives because we had no idea what was next, what that was going to look like. Where were we going to live? What was his job going to be? What was my job going to be? Was I going to be able to keep my job, or was I going to have to get a new job? So many questions and not near as many answers as we hoped. And one day he got a phone call, not from a job in Birmingham. I need to tell y'all, we were so confident that we were going to be living in Birmingham that we had an upcoming trip a few months away that we actually booked our departing flight to be from Birmingham because we knew that we were going to be living in Birmingham. We were so zeroed in on it. And so then we get a phone call for a job that's in Foley, Alabama, not Birmingham. And I'm like, well, entertain it, hear them out, do the interview, but we're probably not going to live there. But at least this is a step in the right direction. Well, my husband, Brian, went to the interview, loved the company, loved the people, loved the area. The only thing I really knew about Foley is that that's where the outlet malls were. But regardless, he loved the area. And so there we go. He ended up accepting a job. And that's where we've been ever since. He's in Foley, we live in Fairhope, and we love it. And RIP to those flights that we booked out of Birmingham because clearly our lives didn't go that direction. But that season of not knowing where our life was going to go and thinking that we had so many things in place, but then it didn't go that way, but also it was quiet for what felt like a very long time. And our lease date just kept getting closer and closer and closer, and we still didn't know where we were going to be. We had to be out in July, and we found out the last couple weeks of June where we were going. So it was up to the very end of that deadline, and that can be stressful and it can feel frustrating, and you can wonder why there's no answer when you're trying to pursue the Lord and you're trying to do his will and you're trying to live in a way that honors him. But when you feel like you're met with silence, that can be really frustrating. And like I was saying earlier, you can feel a little forgotten. But what I have found is that when I am able to trust the Lord in those moments, and really there wasn't anything I could do to control that situation other than release my control of it happening exactly how I wanted it to. We had to broaden our scope and look at other ways that the Lord might want to provide for us, and not just in one specific location for us. But when we release that control and trust and depend and believe that he wants the best for us and his plan for us is good, then that is when you will encounter the Lord in your dependency, in your just desperation for the Lord to provide and to meet you where you are. Even if his provision is just comfort and peace, it's an amazing place to be. I'm almost at a loss for words because you encounter the Lord in a way that is so special and so unique and so different from any other season of life you might find yourself in. So if that's where you are, I want to encourage you to choose trust over control. I think also something that's so beautiful about the monuments of faith, at least in my own life, is that a lot of them have come to exist after a long period of waiting, of working on something with the Lord, waiting for an answer, praying diligently, and then after that was fulfilled, whether it was fulfilled how I hoped it would be or a different way, those moments have now since become monuments of faith in my own life, where I can look back and say, hey, you have experienced a similar experience before, different, but similar in a sense of waiting and just clinging to the Lord in desperation and dependency. And now those moments have turned into monuments. And I think that that is so beautiful, that even when we're in the midst of moments that really cause us to question and doubt and forget that the Lord has been faithful to us before, when we persevere through those and when we make it to the other side, that turns into another monument for us to put our faith on, to build our faith on, and to just add to it and grow in it. And I think that's what's so beautiful about turning our waiting seasons into worship, because there's so much for us to learn, so much that we can grow in. And another thing that I think is important too is that yes, you might be in a waiting season and there might be something specific that you're hoping for, or if it's not waiting, a hard, difficult season, regardless of what it may look like. But even though that situation is difficult, even though you might find yourself waiting for something in particular, something specific that comes to mind, He's still moving in your life. Even if it's not in that particular way that you hoped, I can almost guarantee that if you were to open your eyes up to the rest of your life, you'll be able to see ways that He's moving. And hopefully that encourages you to where you don't feel forgotten, because He is always moving, even if it isn't in exactly the way or exactly the timeline that we hope that He is. And I hope that that's an encouragement to you. So this week, I want you to think about what you feel in your own life during these moments when you begin to question monuments in your faith and in your life. What parameters can you put in place to help you come back and remember those monument moments? Luke talked about how his family writes down his monuments and keeps them as a visual reminder, so that when he is in the middle of moments that feel difficult, they have something to look at and to be reminded of what the Lord has done in their life. What could that look like for you? I think that there's some pretty creative and cool ways that maybe we can do that in our own lives, and having accountability, having people around us that can help us and encourage us is a great place to start too. So as we close out today, I'm going to pray for us. Lord, thank you so much for your provision and your faithfulness, even when we can't feel it, and especially when we can't feel it. I pray that you would help us to remember. It's so easy for us to forget, but I pray that you would help us to remember in those hard moments when we feel like we can't feel you and when we feel forgotten by you. Help us to remember, because you are good, you love us, and you care for us, and you see us, and you haven't forgotten us. Bring that to the forefront of our minds and help us to choose trust over control. Amen.